fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Several shots were fired as President Kennedy's motorcade passed through downtown Dallas.
None of us will ever forget this day. Yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I have a dream. My four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Welcome to the Hagmann Daily Show, weekdays 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And now your hosts, Joe Hagmann and Jon Robberson.
Hello and welcome to this Hagmann Daily Show on this Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018. So glad to be here today. I'm going to open up with a clip today, a clip from everybody's favorite person who listens to this show, and probably everybody's favorite person in America. The Washington Free Beacon was gracious enough to put this together for their viewers and listeners. So we're going to take a listen to what is the latest, and you're going to hear a string of comments, but the latest comes last from Hillary Clinton. So here we go.
Let me just get this out of the way. No, I'm not over it. People say, why haven't you moved on? I say, well, there are tens of millions of people who haven't moved on because there are still so many unanswered questions. It's easy to say, well, you know, she wasn't a good candidate. Then why did I lead all the way to the end?
It's easy to be overwhelmed by all that's going on. I get overwhelmed at least a dozen times a day.
I go a little bit batty when I hear, him say, gee, this is a really hard job.
And his whole campaign, Make America Great Again, was looking backwards. You didn't like black people getting rights. You don't like women, getting jobs. I mean, Trump had a million mistakes. That didn't matter.
There was this really perfect storm. That election was a perfect storm. It was so painful. There was a lot of sexism and misogyny. There was voter suppression. There was the FBI's intervention. And then there were the Russians. If you're too hot, they accuse you of being angry. We really don't want a woman commander-in-chief. If you're kind of apologetic, like, please don't do that to me, you're accused of being weak.
We don't do well with married white women.
Do you think it was a legitimate election?
I think that there are lots of questions about its legitimacy. That probably gets lost in the, oh my gosh, she's a capitalist. When the Comey letter hit, and I don't blame voters, the press bought into it hook, line, and sinker. What does that say?
Did you make enough mistakes yourself to lose the election without any of the other things you talk about?
Well, I will say no, Matt.
You're still blaming others more than yourself.
No. I'm trying to stay in a really positive frame of mind.
And there you have it, the Washington Free Beacon montage.
Here it is. You ready, Joe? You ready? On this fine Tuesday, May 22nd. There's a little age difference, okay, and I respect that. I know that Bill Clinton's around somewhere, but Hillary Clinton, cuddle puddle. That's where I'm at. I mean, I just want to snuggle with the HRC.
Don't you feel bad for her? All these people who worked against her, the American people, black people, white people, Hispanic people, Donald Trump people, Bernie Sanders people, the DNC, the FBI, James Comey, everybody worked against her. The media. That's what happened, right, John? That's why she lost?
Don't forget the John Brennan.
But I thought...
Brennan, Clapper, Mueller, all out to get her, and and with Jeffrey Epstein in jail, what's a girl to do?
It's amazing. We've never seen a presidential candidate that has done this to themselves. I mean, not that she was ever going to run for office or have any legitimacy again, but what we see here, I mean, she has totally imploded. Again, she was the most corrupt candidate ever to run for president, but whatever dignity or self-respect she had left is now gone. I mean, nobody takes her seriously. Nobody takes what she says with any legitimacy. And again, it's as much as the media's fault as it is for the society for the fact that she won't go away. But it's at times it is funny to listen to her go on and on and on and on. The
Well,
grand
the
conspiracy
Hillary
against
Clinton-
her.
The Clinton syndrome is kind of like that deeply personal moment where you realize the rash is still present. I need to switch from the powder to the prescription cream.
Well, John, check this out. An actual sinkhole has opened on the White House lawn, and it's growing. I just found this, not to take away from Hillary Clinton, but maybe she's tunneling.
Good.
Maybe she's tunneling from Barack Obama's Washington D.C. compound. Yeah, like a gopher from Caddyshack.
Well, you remember what happened to the gopher at the end. Bill Murray blew up the whole golf course, but the little gopher not only lived, he did a little boogie to Kenny Loggins. So we need to always be somehow mindful of Kenny Loggins and his place in American culture. Where would we be without the highway to the danger zone?
So interestingly, this article, it says construction on the White House began in 1792. It was almost continuously occupied by U.S. presidents since 1800, barring a few years when the British set fire to it. This week, Stephen Herman from W7VOA News tweeted this. This week, I've been observing a sinkhole on the White House north lawn just outside the press briefing room, growing larger by the day. Again, if it's not Hillary Clinton trying to burrow away into the White House, maybe President Trump is setting a trap for Jim Acosta.
Well, whereas I'm all for slamming Acosta a little bit here and there, I think that Stelter has a more mole-ish appearance. I mean, that guy looks like he never comes above ground. So, who knows? Maybe I think it's apropos that the sinkhole is opening up in front of the press briefing room. Maybe it's. Actually, I'm not even going to say that, but we've got a great show planned, and we've really got a good week remaining here on the Hagmann Daily Show in the weeks remaining of the Hagmann Daily Show, and not to mislead our listeners, but in just a couple of months here, we've got a big relaunch happening. We're rebranding the show and putting a lot more care into the production value and just sort of the tone of the show, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But that being said, Joe, we would be remiss, of course, if we didn't take the Hagmann Daily Show out on its 1-year anniversary with just a great lineup of shows. And this week remaining, of course, we have Stephen Minking checking in with us tomorrow, and Tracy Beans has released some really good information lately. I won't try to summarize it here because I would have to talk for 15 minutes straight, but I'm going to invite Tracy to check in this week, and then of course on Friday we have the debut guest, our friend Carl, and the pharmacist, and he's gonna really educate us on things that everybody wonders when they're standing in line like a big cattle call at CVS or Walgreens, being treated like a criminal because they've got a sore tooth and they're getting a couple of Vicodin. So we're going to get the real deal information on Friday from our debut guest. So I'm excited for the rest of the week. And please forgive me, Stephen, our one of our regular listeners, Stephen, who sends us an email from time to time. But quickly tonight on the Hagmann Report, we've got half an hour of news, and then we're going to hear from Captain Roy again from Reddit, from the subreddit fame, Roy Davis. One of Doug Hagmann's new faves. And then after Captain Roy from 8 to 9, it doesn't get any better, but we've got Josh Tolley, the founder and host of the Josh Tolley Show, nationally syndicated show, the number 2 show on the Genesis network right behind InfoWars. He's coming in 8 to 9. And then there will be no breather because from 9 to 10, we've got Bill Salas checking in right after Josh Tolley. So tonight on the Hagmann Report, I mean, this is not to be missed, Joe.
No, it's going to be a great show. And again, Bill Salas did an awesome job coming on here. We have that show up on YouTube as well for those who missed it, up on our YouTube channel. And John, just a few things I want to talk about today. Whether we get to them or not, it doesn't matter. One, we have what's on the front of Drudge.
Just a few things I want to talk about, whether we get to them or not.
The price of oil set to go even higher. $5 gallon gas hits New York City. and oil set to go higher. 2, implantable health monitors soon for soldiers. And this is an interesting report from the Army Times. Well, a number of interesting reports from the Army Times and documents from the government detailing how they want to add these devices, something I've been studying for a long time, medical implants for patient identification and health information, as well as other AI robotic type systems into soldiers. So I want to make sure we cover that. Also, Maxine Waters, she's under some hot water for unethically transferring $100K to daughter from campaign. Also, we have seen more of what happened with the mole inside the Trump campaign from the Obama administration. The Obama administration paid this person over $1 million between 2012 and 2018. I want to make sure we talk about that. So, and anywhere
is Avenatti involved in that one at all?
Did it have a what?
Is Avenatti, the lawyer, Stormy Daniels, involved in that one?
Very possibly could be. He's seems to have his fingers in a lot of pies. This is
Well, if you can't get Allred, call the legal office of Avenatti and associates. But well, let's start, Joe, with the super soldier thing and AI, and let's even tie it in a little bit with what we've been terming over the last several years, medical tyranny. This is hard to get your head around, but Drudge Report had a big headline yesterday that they're running experiments with AI actually fabricating or attempting through stem cell developments and biotech to fashion human organs. So imagine this: artificial intelligence working to build parts or an actual organ in total. That's one of the 7 or so primary functioning elements of our bodies. I mean, without our liver or lungs or spleen or whatever, we're dead. So we've got this weird AI component, and we know, Joe, that for many years now, remember back in 2012 or 2013 when DARPA released that creepy video of that sort of robot dog about the size of a bull?
Oh, yeah.
And so we know that they've been developing this type thing for some time. And I just spoke with our dear friend Steve Quayle. I just hung up with him right before we started the show today. I do not have permission to go into detail in any way, shape, or form, but I can say this much. Steve and his family have just gone through a significant medical issue with a member of the family having surgery, and post-op, there was some turbulence, and it just revolved around proper patient care, what the practitioner is willing to do for a patient, and this was a major surgery, as you know, Joe. But we're entering a time where there is a tyrannical grid being built around biotech, medical care as a whole, and AI ties into this. And on the darker side of the AI biotech world, there is, of course, the sort of chimera-like development of what we colloquially call super soldiers. So all of this ties in, and I'll say this, Joe, and I'll hand it back to you to unpack the article that you just mentioned. But I sent your dad and yourself a detailed email back in 2013, but this was right when we were just kind of acquainted and we didn't know each other personally that well. I had a friend. Well, to be honest, he was kind of more of a drinking buddy back then, but he was a young man who was very successful. He was in outside sales, and he was one of these kids you meet that's like 25, 26 years old and worth quite a bit for that age, worth quite a bit for any age, really. But Joe, he was an outside sales rep for Philips, the medical equipment company. And you and I talked about this back in 2013, 2014, because you were doing an enormous amount of research back then. I think you had more than enough material to write a book about the medical tyranny component of all of these things that we're talking about. And what this gentleman told me, we had a long talk about this one day. He said, John, you cannot imagine what's coming. We are entering into a singularity function in the world of healthcare where the computers, the bedside monitors, everything from an electrocardiogram to the morphine pump above a post-op patient's bed, all of that is going to be tied into the insurance company as well as the DEA, the FDA, and other government alphabet agencies. So imagine this. You're laying in bed. You've been in a horrific car accident. You've got a couple compound fractures, maybe a punctured lung. You're in enormous pain. And before the doctors can administer that next morphine shot, the machine requires, it takes the authority completely away from the physician or the nurse. The machine, through the federal government and through your insurance company, will dictate whether or not you can receive that next supplement of morphine, regardless of the severity of your injury. So that being said, Joe, my takeaway from this is, on one hand, we're building a control grid around every American who requires any type of medical care, including dental. And then at the same time, we have the darker side of biotech and AI devolving into beast tech and building basically the type of things, Joe, that we saw 20, 25 years ago in the Terminator films.
Yeah, and it's here, it's here now. Excuse me. Let's take a look at this article from the Army Times. There's one article I'm looking at from 3 days ago and one from February 22nd. So let's look at February 22nd. This new blood test can detect traumatic brain injury in troops. A new type of blood test is being used to detect mild traumatic brain injury, Army researchers have announced. Sounds, good. Sounds like it's a great idea. It's the first blood test to use in evaluating mild TBI to be approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, according to a February 14th release from the Army Medical Deployment or Development Activity. There's blood tests for diseases on the market, but this is the first one dedicated to traumatic brain injury, the neurosurgeon said. For the first time, medical personnel won't have to rely on a description of the incident and symptoms, but will have access to an object marker of injury to the brain, all from a simple blood test. The test holds a promise to change the practice of medicine for brain injury. The goal is to have the blood test ready for fielding the force in the next 18 to 18 months. The blood test can help fill critical knowledge gap in assessing injuries to troops in remote locations. This, according to the DoD Brain Health Research Program. Now, remember, under Barack Obama, he deployed the Brain Mapping Initiative. So this is all part of...
nice catch. Let's cover that a little bit too, Joe. The Brain Mapping Initiative. That's one of those underreported things that could have some really long-term consequences.
Yeah. But so today's article, soldiers may soon have implantable health monitors and robotic surgeries done remotely. Soldiers soon may be carrying monitoring devices that can alert doctors that's thousands of miles away to medical emergencies and the need for treatment. The devices may even be implanted in soldiers and continually monitoring their status, the Army's top doctor said in describing the near future Army medicine. We should be monitoring all soldiers all the time, looking for patterns of injury or signs of early detection. This, according to the Army Surgeons General. We can do better with every soldier is a sensor and to continually monitor information culled from them. Culled, as in like culling the herd. There's an explosion of wearable and soon to be implantable, implantable peripheral monitors. Peripheral. I'm sorry, John. I'm having a hard time today with my
it's okay. Anyway. You're on the periphery.
No, I know though. Anyway, we see this technology. I've done thousands of hours of research into implantable wearable health technology for patient identification and health information. It's called, Health IT. They have different names for it. They have the Open Government Plan that the HHS put together in 2016. They have what's called the medical countermeasures. This would be considered a medical countermeasure. Now, according to the FDA and the USDA, this would be helpful information related to medical countermeasures and preparedness for governments and partners. And it goes through a whole list from emergency response to food defense to reasons why, in emergency situations, is the reasons why we would need this medical countermeasures, which would include some type of chip or some type of implantable wearable tag that can not only monitor information in real time, more than health information, but we're talking about stuff that goes well far and beyond just health application. John, I don't know when you want to jump in here. I have countless documents and
yeah, let's do this. I want you to keep the floor, buddy, but bear with me. I'm just going back to Drudge. There's a piece posted today, Joe, and for some reason you have good internet. The internet's like hair. You got good days and bad days. I think I'm having a bad internet day today. But there's a piece on Drudge, and maybe you can pull it up faster than I can. It's middle column at the bottom, if I remember correctly, about some new reports coming out that wearables, that these Apple, eye, body, super duper, get in great shape wearables are actually causing some pretty significant side effects, which doesn't surprise me because we know the iPhone is like cooking your head in a microwave.
Right. And this is, the radiation. This is one of the main concerns about these wearable technologies. They don't even know the side effects of, dangerous side effects reported from fitness trackers. And they have recently put out reports of the dangers of cell phones and computers, LED lights, and cancer causings. Let's listen to this report.
Keep riding, keep riding.
Chris Nelson is an active dad.
Gotta get all the way back to our house, okay?
Who liked counting his steps and tracking his heart rate with his new fitness tracker. But after several weeks, while putting 3-year-old Emily to bed,
and was picking her up like this to take her to the other room.
He says the Fitbit Charge 2 shocked him, causing him to drop his daughter.
It was clearly an electric shock.
I love seeing Emily was not hurt, but he says it left a painful lump on his wrist and his hand temporarily numb.
Best I could figure is I was just shocked by the connector that was on my wrist.
It shot up my arm. It was intense.
Mom Lauren Reese swears 2 different Fitbit models shocked her.
As soon as I looked down at my arm, I noticed immediately that it still hurt.
She says one jolt left this lasting mark.
You can see my burn. It matches up perfectly.
If you search federal complaints, you'll find other reports, like it sent a shooting, painful electric shock down to my fingers and up to my elbow. In another, the zing burning sensation lasted a couple days.
This is a danger that needs to be addressed.
Fitbit says it takes all reports of potential issues seriously, and its products are designed to prevent electrical contact with the user. In each reported case it's investigated, Fitbit says the devices and batteries were found to be fully intact and functional, with no signs of overheating, voltage irregularities, or malfunction of any kind. They did suggest it is more likely that the shock was caused by static electricity built up on the person.
I just don't think it's static. I think there's something else going on.
Kelly Robinson is a professional engineer who says static can build up on a body, but adds static is often a scapegoat when companies can't figure out what's really wrong.
People shouldn't be getting shocked by their watch.
All right, so there you have it. A report detailing just the exterior physical side effects of the Fitbit, but this is only one, and I'd say a minor part is the outside, shocking or burning sensations. The real danger lies in the radiation. The real danger lies in, whatever this could be doing as far as cancer causing, manipulating cells and whatnot with the type of energy being used. And then when you talk about the implantable health devices, you're opening yourself up to a whole new world of that. And they have these implantable devices in place, or want to have them in place, and it's already law, but they keep pushing it back. Anything from bioterrorism and drug preparedness to emergency preparedness, as I said, food defense, other medical countermeasures, emergency situations, and all kinds of other applications that have nothing to do with health that they won't tell you about until after the fact. And John, with what Patrick Wood said the other night about the AI system and the beast tech that is coming, this huge system that will be all-encompassing, I have no doubt in my mind that something like these implantable health devices would be used specifically to control from that computer system. You'd have to be hooked up to a computer in some way, and the computer would have to be in control in some way. And that's how this looks like it's playing out.
Indeed it does. And the takeaway from this is simple. And there's kind of a almost like a sarcastic irony in this, because people take us to task all the time. In fact, somebody in chat last night was reading us the riot act because we use Twitter and Facebook, and frankly, the Hagmann Report does not use those major social media platforms too much compared to other our counterparts across the new media. But it's very similar with the iPhones and these other technologies. We need to use them as a proper tool to a degree, but we need to remain mindful, Joe, that whether it's an iPhone, whether it's Alexa, Siri, Google Play, or a wearable, a Fitbit, these are radio. This is radio communication. This is two-way communication. And when you talk about something like a Fitbit, and I mean, imagine this. You just read an article about a man who sounded like, or I'm sorry, we just heard a piece. It sounds like a very competent, loving father who dropped his 3-year-old daughter because he got a shock from his Fitbit. Now, you and I, Joe, are always very hesitant to leap right onto the conspiracy boat and say, it's the government, it's DARPA, it's the New World Order. The reality is that sometimes you just have bad cell phone service, and sometimes something like a Fitbit, I'm sure, can emit a shock. Sometimes e-cigarettes blow up in people's faces, but it's rare. But the takeaway here is we have these two-way communication devices, and people in their sort of lackadaisical, sort of asleep mode fail to remember it is a two-way communication device. If you can access information from it, or if you can garner information or intel, you are also transmitting information and intel. And Joe, I don't know if you remember high school biology. That's about as far as I got in the hard sciences, but I was fascinated looking at cellular structure under the microscopes. That was one of the really cool things that I remember. And we know that your mitochondria in your cell structure are the little powerhouses of the actual human cell. Well, really any living thing. Mitochondria is in everything. And mitochondria is directly affected by electrical current. We know that electrical current is what keeps our hearts beating. In fact, I think I mentioned this to you once before, but in the movie and TV business, special effects guys, when they're packing black powder, making what they call lifters, which are these little hockey pucks full of black powder that are used to mimic explosions, or if they're using gasoline, if they're about to aspirate some sort of fuel or propellant into the air and ignite it, they actually remove. First of all, effects guys never wear watches. They don't wear Fitbits. They don't keep their iPhones in their back pocket. They keep nothing on them that can emit even a slight spark, because in their line of work, it could effectively immolate you. But they will also have a friend or their number two on set will stand behind them and hold their wrist, effectively grounding them through the second person back down to the ground, because the body itself can emit a slight spark. Just like when you run a comb through a cat's coat, you see sparks if you do it in a dark room. So all of this technology, it cuts both ways. And I think that the wise move for our listeners and for ourselves as well is to use the technology to a degree, but then by all means, leave it alone. And I just want to drop this piece on you, Joe. This is from the eventchronicle.com, written just over a year ago, February 3rd, 2017. The byline just says, editor, DARPA genetically modified humans for a super soldier army. This is, it's by Paul A. Phillips. I'm talking about the Pentagon's DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, DARPA, creation of a super soldier army with superhuman abilities achieved through genetic modification. So remember, listeners, this is a marriage of AI, of actual hard technology, with biotech. It's the intersection of organic human tissue and machine. It says, going on for some years, shrouded in secrecy, these mutants will make future wars totally different games. The genetic modification of specific human genes will give these soldiers certain characteristics advantageous on the battlefield, giving rise to the most amazing abilities and performances. Smarter, sharper, more focused, and more physically stronger, bad sentence there, than their enemy counterparts, these soldiers will be capable of telepathy, run faster than Olympic champions, lift up record-breaking weights through the development of exoskeletons, regrow limbs lost in combat, possess a super strong immune system, go for days and days without food or sleep. And then, of course, he goes on to say, then there's the emotional side. These soldiers will have empathy genes deleted and show no mercy while devoid of fear. Wow.
Yeah. Wow, indeed. And, there is no limit to this scientific tyranny that we are very likely to see in our lifetime. And just to give you an idea here, let me look through some of the other documents that I have. They have already laid out the legal and regulatory framework, as I said, for this to happen. They even have the Public Emergency Medical Countermeasure Strategy and Implementation Plan that was drafted by HHS, which is just a huge packet of information of how they are going to establish regulatory pathways to facilitate the use of these implantable chips, as well as develop logistical and operational plans for their optimum use of the countermeasures at all levels of response. They're going to address medical countermeasure gaps for all sectors of American civilian population through threat-based approaches, through all kinds of, I'm not going to read this whole appendix here, but let me tell you something. They have their ducks in a row. All they need is the right disaster, the right excuse.
And it's coming. And Joe, as I was listening to your commentary, and I'm actually really pleased with the direction we chose to take the show today, I've been reminded a lot lately, and this goes back about 2 years ago to a friend of the show, Sergeant Tim, who we haven't heard from lately, but Sergeant Tim, 20-year veteran, weapons specialist and Russian linguist, worked in the upper echelons overseas of international weapons inspection. So to give people an idea of who he is, he was an interpreter for General Ham. General Ham is the general that infamously tried to send the quick reaction force from the Italian air base into Benghazi. So General Ham, big time military guy. And Tim and I used to correspond in these long emails about the similarities between the world right before World War I, Joe, and our world today. The geopolitical complications, the alliances and the treaties and the pacts that literally, like a domino effect, drew the entire world into war because a relatively insignificant member of the royal house of Austria was murdered in Sarajevo. Not something you would tend to think would require the deaths of tens of millions of military personnel and civilians to mitigate. And one of the key characteristics of World War I, Joe, setting geopolitics aside, is our weapons outran our wisdom. Yep. We saw Napoleonic battlefield tactics where soldiers marched like they did in the Civil War into Maxim machine gun fire. We saw the introduction of poison gas, submarine warfare, the whole air war, the idea of dropping bombs not only on the enemy's positions, but ultimately by the end of World War I, dropping bombs from canvas, biplanes, canvas and baling wire aircraft onto civilians. So all of these things were an example of the weapons and the technology had far outpaced human wisdom. And I think, Joe, when we look at AI, super soldiers, the Chimera experiments that Alex Jones has been reporting on for years, Fitbits, the singularity I just described a moment ago from one of the major medical machine manufacturers in the country, Philips. All of these things indicate to me that yet again, human technology, coming from the root word technos, meaning witchcraft in Koinonia Greek, we've outrun our wisdom. And what happens at the end of the day, if we look at history, and we agree that history is cyclical, Joe, is when technological capability, when weaponized technology outpaces human wisdom, a lot of people die.
Mm-hmm. We've seen that historically, and today is no different. And, we'll have to do a show on this, John, one specific show, just presenting, or maybe I can do a presentation separately and put it up on YouTube. But they have everything from a 5 to 10 year vision to the health IT, the future we want, health IT, federal health IT 2015 to 2020. So we are right in the thick of it, of this agenda that they're attempting to roll out, just wondering how they're going to be able to do it. So this is something that we are going to obviously continue to follow and keep a close eye on, because today and each and every day we move forward, technology increases exponentially, and we're going to get to a point where they're going to try to merge everybody with this technology. So definitely something to keep our eye on. John, let's switch to the growing...
Wait, before we do, got to ask you a quick question.
Okay.
Bear with me, it's 60 seconds. Do you remember, it was just a little over a year ago, I think it was either March or April 2017, we brought a guest on, debut guest on the Hagmann Report. She's only been on one time, but she was really a lovely debut guest. Her name was Lauren, and she was a medical coding administrator. Remember her?
Yes.
And she came on the show. This was such a bombshell. I'm amazed that this show didn't go mega viral. It really should have. And she showed us, Joe, in that, I forget what the book's called, but it's the size of a Manhattan phone book. It's like 500-600 pages thick. And they use it for the coding. So everything you go to the hospital for, whether it's a boo-boo or a massive issue, has numeric codes that are sent to the insurance company so the insurance company can then reimburse the practitioner. Joe, she showed us in that book in 2017, and it was the 2017 edition. The manual comes out every year. She showed us numerous medical codes for billing for different human chimera type things. And I ask you about this because when I first heard Alex Jones talk about this sort of island of Dr. Moreau kind of stuff, I thought it was a bunch of malarkey. And yet here we are a couple of years later. Alex proves to be correct yet again. Joe, there are creepy labs, maybe even in your hometown, where they are working around the clock to misuse biotech to create monsters.
Yep, they are. And to what extent, we don't really know yet, but we know it's very nefarious and that they're not going to stop. Even the top tech industries own people like Elon Musk. Here, let's do a search and see if we can play this about the demon force. Elon Musk says summoning demon. And we're going to see if we can find this one sound clip because it's so important.
Why do they always want to? What is
Here
wrong,
it is.
Joe?
Here
really,
it is, John.
Let's summon a demon. I mean, what's wrong with these people, man?
Let's listen to what they say.
We should be very careful about artificial intelligence. If I were to guess at what our biggest existential threat is, it's probably that. So we need to be very careful with artificial intelligence. I'm increasingly inclined to think that there should be some regulatory oversight maybe at the national and international level, just to make sure that we don't do something very foolish. I mean, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Didn't work out.
So there you have it. We're literally summoning the demon.
Wow. That makes wow number 3 and 4 out of my mouth today on the show. Joe, summoning the demon. Let me ask you a question. I don't think we've ever discussed this offline or publicly. Can you explain to me and our listeners what the white paper legitimate reason for CERN, for the Hadron Collider is? We know what's happening spiritually. I mean, we saw it demonstrated in summer of 2016 with that grotesque opening of the tunnel going through the Alps. We know that it's Luciferian by spiritual definition, but how do they sell? Like, what are they trying to accomplish? How is the whole CERN
exactly
thing
what I believe
going to help humanity?
Well, it's not going to help humanity. It's going to help these evil people carry out their evil agenda. And what they're really trying to do is to understand dark matter and understand how they are able to navigate through it, because they believe they would be able to do a number of crazy things like interstellar space travel and just basically control the universe if they understood how to control dark matter. And I've read, there was just recently declassified CIA and other government documents that talked about theoretically traveling through time and on and on and on with all this craziness talk. And it had to do specifically with the manipulation, understanding and the manipulation of dark matter.
See, call me ignorant, call me naive, but the concept of actively seeking something called dark matter sounds like a really bad idea.
Yeah, well, it is. And, we understand only so much of the universe. Science does. And Albert Einstein's theory of relativity explained a lot. But if they follow those same lines, they have other beliefs that they can do other things. Now, what dark matter is defined as is a theorized form of matter that is believed to account for approximately 80% of the matter in the universe and about a quarter of its total energy density. The majority of dark matter is thought to be non-baronic in nature, possibly being composed of some as yet undiscovered subatomic particles. It's not directly observed, but its presence is implied in a variety of astrophysical observations, including gravitational effects that cannot be explained unless more matter is present than can be seen. For this reason, most experts believe dark matter to be ubiquitous in the universe and having had strong influence in its structure and evolution. But this is what CERN does. It is a particle collider that basically how do they term it? Redoing the Big Bang Theory by smashing different particles to try to create the same effects and observable matter that started the universe, part of this matter being dark matter, most of the matter being dark matter. And if they can learn how to manipulate dark matter, then they will be able to basically bend time and space. And I believe that goes into what the Bible says about performing lying signs and wonders and the great deception. I believe it has everything to do with the end times great deception.
Ooh, good catch. I was just going to ask you from historical context, when we look at a couple of scientists who literally changed the world, I'm thinking particularly of Albert Einstein and Robert J. Oppenheimer. So we know that Einstein's theory of relativity nudged us closer to probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, scientific, finger quotes here, air quotes, advancements in human history, and that's the splitting of the atom. But Einstein wrote letters to Franklin Delano Roosevelt and to a number of other people in positions of power at the time. I believe he corresponded with Harry Hopkins, FDR's personal assistant, really a deep state inside man for sure. And he warned us about what was going to happen with the misuse or even perhaps the bringing to fruition of some of the formulae that he developed, that Einstein developed. And then we know that Oppenheimer, after the successful experiments in New Mexico and then the subsequent bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, literally launching us, pardon the pun, into the atomic age, we know that Oppenheimer essentially died a broken man. He was, by most historical accounts, an effectively emotionally miserable human being for what he had birthed into society. So we see in Einstein and Oppenheimer, just 2 generations ago, we see a hesitance, a reticence to go full force forward with things like dark matter and all of the things that DARPA does. Remember, listeners, you pay for DARPA and CERN and what we saw at the opening of that tunnel 2 years ago. I mean, it seems like the scientists nowadays, Joe, really want to dance with the demons. It doesn't seem like that Einstein-Oppenheimer regret is there at all. Have you remember the picture of all the scientists getting together and dancing around Shiva, the goddess of death and destruction?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you're right. They've, we talk about this all the time, it being a spiritual war, there being evil all over, and, the evil people at the highest levels of government, entertainment, and on and on and on. And it's no different in science, and they all work on this agenda. This is why these secret societies and other organizations like Council on Foreign Relations and whatnot are so important to carrying out their agenda, because they combine all the different areas of expertise from, again, science and technology, business, media, Hollywood, politics, and on and on and on. So this is their agenda, and this is what they're rolling out with. Meanwhile, we focus on things like getting our country back and draining the swamp, when in reality, we drain the swamp here in America. There's still a global swamp that is ready to step in and fill the void. And all it takes is one global type disaster and a breakdown of some kind in society, and we are looking at the implementation of these things. So once they figure that out, if they haven't figured out already how to manipulate dark matter, and judging from the UFO sightings and all this craziness that's going on in the skies, I have a reason to believe that they probably do know how to manipulate dark matter. But whether they're still in experimental phase or whether they are closer than we think, either way, things are happening, from prophetic things to all kinds of weird and interesting things in these times we live. So we have to keep our eyes open, John.
Well, God will not be mocked. And I think that we can wrap a lot of this really, I think, valuable discussion here this afternoon, Joe, in that simple biblical truth. God will not be mocked. And what these men and women are doing is they've become intoxicated by the satanic deception of being God. And we can extrapolate that a step further, maybe switch gears a little bit here. Joe, was it, we just saw the wedding the other day, in the House of Windsor, which, by the way, I really couldn't care less about. Ever since I saw Meghan Markle in the picture with George Soros Jr. in the red shoes, that's it. I'm done with Meghan Markle. But who was it? Was it Prince Harry? About 5 years ago, 6-7 years ago, made that infamous, villainous statement that he believes in reincarnation and he'd like to come back as a supervirus.
Yeah.
And so these people, I cannot emphasize this enough, Joe. From the people wearing the pink hats at the Women's March in D.C. and their shirts that say "My Body, My Choice," all the way to the full-blown eugenicists, the Margaret Sangers, the Hitlers, the Stalins, and I fear many on the secular progressive left today in this country. Joe, at the end of the day, what these people are about is death. Because remember, sin and sickness are symbiotic. They are hand in glove. And we know this because in the days of Noah, before sin became so ultimately corrupting and so prevalent in every strata of our society, people like Enoch and Methuselah lived for 800-900 years. Why? Because they did not have the sicknesses, the invasions of the bacteria and the viruses that are the physical demonstration or the physical personification of actual sin, of the moral decline into sin. And so what I think we're seeing today is a world that's corrupt on all levels. And it's just so hard some days to parse through it all. What we see recently with the revelation that the acting president of the United States put a spy in the Donald Trump campaign, and that's been revealed now, and that's just one example of the corruption. And then you look at the whole Mueller investigation, which is a special counsel that's completely run amok. I've never seen anything like it in my life. It is genuinely an investigation in search of a crime, and they're willing to look all over town. This is all corruption, but what it really is, Joe, is it's the exponential explosion of sin. And so as we see sin grow and manifest, and all of the sicknesses that manifest commensurate to a society in sin, then I think a natural reaction of scientists who are secularists and who are atheists, they believe, I think, that perhaps they're going to mitigate many of these sicknesses without realizing that it is their actions and the actions of all of us when we do choose to ignore God that's causing the sicknesses to begin with. Did I just make sense?
Yeah, you did. Absolutely. And, it's unbelievable. We see it every day in our society, the craziness and how far, from the school shootings to everything we see, John. We don't have to go through every evil. And I know you wanted to talk about this. Jim Carrey, this is a good segue to this topic. What's going on with Jim Carrey? He's been seeming to be a little out there as of late, making very strange statements and weird paintings and all kinds of crazy stuff. What have you observed was going on with him?
Well, thank you, Joe. Now, this is from Observer.com, not a website I'm real familiar with, but Jim Carrey's got yet another turkey on his hands with a film called Dark Crimes. And this is written by Rex Reed, and it was written that's got to be a mistake because we haven't got there yet. But anyway, the date's wrong. But it says, what has happened to Jim Carrey? Once revered comedian with a big fan base, Carrey hasn't made a good movie in 10 years. And the ones he's in have been box office bombs. Now he's turned to drama. And like an army of funny men who tried it before, hoping for new respect as a serious actor from both critics and audiences, he is advised to brace himself. I admire Carrey for taking on a grim and sobering project, get this, made in Krakow, Poland, that requires a range he would never be asked to show in any American sitcom. But Dark Crimes is so lurid, irrelevant, and unwatchable, it makes you wonder if he even read the script. With hair cropped down to his scalp, and a white beard, grappling with a strange Eastern European accent that sounds like Ace Ventura pet detective enrolled in a crash course at Berlitz. Carey plays Tadek, a disgraced cop demoted to typing the details of criminal cases into the Krakow police archives. Now, bear with me, listeners, we're getting there. Desperate to restore his reputation and redeem himself by reopening an old unsolved murder involving a prominent businessman who frequented a notorious sex club called The Cage, he uncovers a cache of videos from The Cage showing a secret den of horror where violent crimes against women as sex objects were offered as entertainment. The deeper he delves into the case, the more obsessed he becomes, watching over and over again the tapes of what went on at the Cage, while we moviegoers follow along. Lots of naked women hanging from the ceiling and engaging in orgies with each other while the customers applaud. The rules. Members who joined by invitation only could do anything they desired to the women except murder them, quote, because corpses did not look so good in makeup, end quote. Finally, his wife serves his fried eggs during images of women chained and crawling on all fours like animals and asks, quote, do we have to listen to this over breakfast, end quote. Jim Carrey, what have we seen in the last couple of years? We have seen the literal dissolution of a man's identity. He's been quoted at events and on red carpet step and repeats saying that he doesn't exist, and to the interviewer, you don't exist. None of this exists.
Yeah,
we are a fallacy. And Joe, I don't know what happened to Jim Carrey as a young man, but he's got the demonstrable components of an MK Ultra type thing written all over him. And see, what makes this so satanic, Joe, is Jim Carrey is using his platform and his fame to tell people that they do not have an identity. And by doing that, by erasing the idea that someone truly has an identity, then he's robbing a person of what they need in order to make a decision for Jesus Christ and obtain a new identity in Christ. So you see how wicked and how evil this is, how Satan's using this incredibly disturbed man?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, and it happens all the time in Hollywood and in the music and other industries, and it is absolutely something we need to constantly pray against, absolutely all the time, because as we know, that's one of in the spiritual warfare, our best spiritual weapons. John, you mentioned the Trump campaign and the spying. There's an interesting piece up. Obama's mole inside Trump campaign received small fortune from DOD. In one of the most stunning revelations in the 2018, President Trump has rightfully declared action against former President Barack Obama bigger than Watergate. We are now only beginning to see the forest for the trees in this situation. Anyway, what is this article going on to say? It's going on to say that the informant...
Unbelievable, Joe. I'm sorry, bear with me. I know I'm being rude, but brother, think about what you just read. I mean, it leaves a man stupefied. This is just unbelievable.
It is. So the public record shows Stephen Halper, a foreign policy expert outed as an FBI informant that spied on Donald Trump in his presidential campaign, was paid a large sum of money in 2016 for the work he did for the Obama administration. The DOD paid Halper $282,000 on September 27, 2016, months before the election. Work titled was India and China Economy Study. It also tracks the sum of one of two payments made to Halper for the job, the second worth $130,000, made in July of 2017, and it says that the U.S. Gov shows the Department of Defense paid Halper a total of $1,058,161 for work between 2012 and 2018. The work designated for India-China study comprised nearly 40% of that compensation. The sheer filthiness of all this has me running around for hand sanitizer, says author Andrew West of theconstitution.com. This piece is from the Constitution. It's also up on Hagmann Report. But can you believe that our own tax dollars paid for the spy against President Donald Trump and his campaign?
And not only that, but John Brennan, by his own admission, former CIA Director John Brennan, has admitted that he put together, he did not admit that he put together a team, but he has admitted the existence of a team to to search for and access and do data capture and collection on candidate Trump. And he tried to sort of write himself a ghetto pass by saying, well, in my position, obviously I'm not going to interfere in domestic issues. That would be referred over to the director of the FBI, which really made me breathe a sigh of relief that James Clapper would follow the law and refer it over to Comey. Yeah. I mean, boy, that's really out of the frying pan and into the fire. But Joe, what we see here, in my opinion, is simply this. The FBI, the CIA, I think the DIA, and probably to a lesser degree some of the other intel agencies were corrupted. There was a secret society type model built into some of the agents and some of the administrators and directors at both Central Intelligence and the FBI who had a single distinct purpose, and that was to ensure that candidate Donald Trump never became President Donald Trump. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Hillary Clinton said it herself when she had her election night breakdown after her 19th glass of Chardonnay. We're all going to hang for this. And I paraphrase it a little bit, but she herself said, they're going to hang us all.
Yeah, that's exactly what she said. And she, hopefully we get that justice. There's a piece up on the Liberty Daily that I want to look at real quick. Congressman Rosenstein's referral to the Attorney General has no subpoena power. It's a ruse. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein's request for an Inspector General investigation seems to have raised more questions than it has answered. Hours after President Trump demanded a probe into whether former President Obama's FBI Justice Department had used questionable tactics to spy on his campaign, Rosenstein asked IG Horowitz to launch an investigation. But asking Horowitz to step in appears to be a calculated move by Rosenstein, who not necessarily is an effort to endorse Trump's demands or even get to the truth. Here's the problem with Mr. Horowitz. He cannot interview any of the people who have left the Department of Justice or FBI. According to Joe DeGeneva, he has no subpoena authority, so all of the people who were part of the plot and were in the DOJ and FBI are gone. He can't talk to them. So very interesting. We're going to have to dig more into this to see exactly what the legal, I take Geneva's word for it, but we got to do our own research to see exactly what is being talked about here. And it's, this is just crazy. This is the biggest political scandal in U.S. American history, and nobody is getting in trouble. My dad says, Joe, be patient. I say, okay. But at some point, before, I hope, the 2018 midterm election, we see justice.
We have to. Look, we're at the point where the rest of the free world, and for that matter, the developing world and the world held captive by communism, all eyes are on us. And the once great city on a hill, to paraphrase the Bible, Lincoln and Reagan, is diminishing daily in the eyes of the rest of the world. Joe, I said this to your dad last night, and he kind of harumphed and agreed that if we don't institute justice, and if some of these swamp monsters are not perp walked right into a concrete box, some of them should probably be shot for treason, frankly, but we'll tone it down and just say a prison sentence. If that does not occur, Joe, we will have lost, in my opinion, a vast amount of the equity that we have with the rest of the world by demonstrating that we can no longer patrol our own justice system. The DOJ, probably to a lesser extent the DOD, the State Department is into this up to their eyeballs, particularly after 4 years of Hillary running the show over there. Joe, this is an enormous disaster, and you're absolutely correct. This is the political scandal of the century, and I'll make this my final comment for today, brother. All of our listeners, please go to thelibertydaily.com today. There are 5 or 6 articles posted right at the top that are just mission critical. But, Joe, we would need a whole nother hour to unpack these. But these are important articles. Unethical leadership, how James Comey's disloyal subversion has severely damaged our justice system. Report, Obama regime mole, Stephen Halper pitched himself for ambassadorship. John Brennan's vicious tweet means he's worried about being exposed. FBI, not only Obama agency spying on Trump in 2016. I mean, the headlines go on and on and on. Again, thelibertydaily.com. Joe, what else do? We pray and we prep.
That's right, and we are out of time. Don't forget, simplycleanfoods.net is our sponsor. That's simplycleanfoods.net, promo code simplyclean. Go there and find all your survival storable products. as well as other survival needs. We will be back tomorrow. Have a great day.
The Hagmann Daily Show is brought to you by the Hagmann Report. Tune in to the Hagmann Report weekdays, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to HagmannReport.com. That's HagmannReport.com.